You are standing at the center of the world, not metaphorically, not in a poem, geographically. Somewhere beneath the cliffs of Mount Parnassus, a stone hump called the omphalos marks the exact spot where Zeus released two eagles from the opposite ends of the earth, and they met in the middle of the sky. That spot, the ancients insisted, was here. You have walked 5 days to reach it. The sacred way climbs past the treasury houses of Athens and Siphnos, crammed with gold, past marble statues of athletes and kings, past the bronze serpent column twisted like a frozen scream, and the air is already changing. Wood smoke, myrrh, and underneath it, something sharper, a sweet chemical breath rising from the rocks themselves like a cellar full of sleeping fruit. Ahead of you, a door swings open in the temple of Apollo. An old woman in a plain linen robe is carried through it by priests and settled onto a golden tripod. Her eyes roll back, her lips move, and for the next few minutes, the most powerful men in the Mediterranean will be taking orders from the voice that comes out of her mouth. In your world, when you need an answer, you pull a glowing rectangle out of your pocket and type 3 words. The answer arrives in silence, in milliseconds, free of charge. Your ancestors had no such luxury. Their answers had an address, and the address was this mountain. Kings waited weeks, sometimes months, for an audience with this woman. They consulted her before declaring war, before signing treaties, before marrying, before founding a city, before burying their dead, and the stakes were never cosmetic. Ask wrong, and your army starved in a mountain pass. Ask wrong, and your colony was slaughtered in its second winter. Ask wrong, and your marriage was a 40-year disaster with children. The Greeks did not always follow the gods' advice, but they always asked. For 1,000 years, the civilized world ran on this, and you have never once asked the obvious question. What really happened inside that room? Was there a gas, a fraud, a genuine woman who could see tomorrow? And why has the answer been sealed in a vault of myth for 25 centuries? Stay with me. Because the truth involves geology that modern scientists are still fighting over, an intelligence empire that quietly ran the ancient world, and one woman's scream that no theory has ever been able to explain away. The first thing you need to know is that the ritual was theater, and the theater was real. The process never changed for centuries. The consultants bathed in the Castalian Spring, a cold stream gushing out of the rock a short walk from the temple. They paid their fee. They sacrificed a goat at the outer altar, and here is the part the movies leave out. The priests poured cold water over the goat's back, and if the animal shivered before the water hit the ground, the god was present and the consultation could proceed. If the goat did not shiver, you went home. Rejected. Your question not dignified with an answer. Then, on the appointed day, the 7th day of the month, Apollo's own birthday, the Pythia was prepared. She was not an exotic oracle. She was an elderly local woman, usually a peasant from one of the farms around the mountain, chosen by the priests for a lifetime of service. She bathed. She chewed laurel leaves, the sacred plant of Apollo. She was carried into the innermost chamber, the adyton, and seated on the tripod over the mouth of a chasm in the stone floor. And the ancient sources all agree on one detail that modern people stopped believing. The geographer Strabo, writing around 20 CE, describes it plainly in Book 9 of his Geography. There was a hollow in the earth beneath the temple, and a breath, a pneuma, rose from it, an air that seized the prophetess and threw her into frenzy. The ancient world insisted on the chasm. Everyone who visited, everyone who wrote it down, insisted on the breath rising from the ground. For 2,000 years, that was the whole story of Delphi, and nobody needed to believe it, because the results spoke for themselves. The second thing is where it gets uncomfortable for anyone who wants the oracle to be pure magic or pure trickery. The oracle ran on ambiguity, and the ambiguity was the product. Herodotus, the father of history, records the most famous test in the oracle's long career in Book 1 of his histories. King Croesus of Lydia, the richest man on earth, wanted to know which oracle in the world was genuinely divine. He sent envoys to every famous shrine, ordering them to wait 100 days, then ask what Croesus was doing on that exact day. Only Delphi answered correctly. Croesus was boiling a tortoise and a lamb together in a bronze cauldron with a bronze lid. Satisfied, Croesus then asked the question that matters: should he march against the growing power of Persia? And the Pythia answered, if you cross the river Halys, you will destroy a great empire. Croesus crossed, and in 546 BCE, at the gates of his burning capital, he understood the answer too late. The great empire he destroyed was his own. Around the same machinery, a generation later, the Athenians asked how to survive the incoming Persian invasion of 480 BCE, and the oracle told them to trust their wooden walls. The mysticals alone read the riddle correctly. The wooden walls were the fleet. The Battle of Salamis was won in the Narrows, and Athens survived. Now ask yourself a question nobody asks. How did a peasant woman on a mountain keep advising winners for 1,000 years? Because she was not the only mind in that room. The priests of Delphi were the best informed people in the Greek world. Every king, every general, every merchant who mattered passed through those gates and talked, gossiped, bragged, and bribed. Delphi was a choke point of information, an intelligence clearinghouse disguised as a god, and out of that flood of news the answers were shaped. The advice was frequently excellent: do not invade, fortify the Narrows, colonize here, not there, and hundreds of real cities, from Cyrene in North Africa to Byzantium on the Bosphorus, were founded on real ground on the instructions of that voice. The third thing is the part nobody believed until recently, and it cracked the myth wide open. In 1892, French archaeologists under Théophile Aumale finally excavated the Temple of Apollo down to the foundations. They found the Adyton, and they found no chasm, no vent, no crack in the floor beneath the tripod, no breath rising from the earth. The god's machinery was gone, or had never existed. For a century, the scientific world laughed at the entire tradition. Fraud, hysteria, a clever cult of female trance artists. Then, in the late 1990s, a geologist named Gélé de Boer of Wesleyan University and an archaeologist named John Hale of the University of Louisville did fieldwork that changed the conversation. They carefully mapped the geology beneath the ruined temple and found two active faults, the Kurna Fault and the Delphi Fault, running directly underneath it, converging exactly where the Adyton once stood. The local limestone, it turned out, is laced with bituminous layers, ancient hydrocarbon deposits. Warm springs in the region bubble with the residue. Their analysis, published in the journal Geology in 2001, proposed that groundwater seeping through hot limestone along those faults could release ethylene, a gas you have probably never heard of. Ethylene smells sweet, like ether. It produces euphoria, a floating dissociation from your own body, hallucinations, and a trance state in which a person speaks with fluency and authority and remembers none of it afterward. In a small, unventilated stone room, a concentrated breath of that gas could do exactly what the ancient sources described. The old woman over the crack, eyes rolled back, voice not her own, delivering answers she would not remember when she woke. Suddenly, Strabo's pneuma read less like superstition and more like a geology report. And here is where the experts start shouting at each other, which is the fourth thing you need to know. The French excavation found no chasm, and no later dig has found one either. Critics of the ethylene theory point out that the gas concentrations needed for a real trance may never have accumulated in that chamber, and that Delphic geology is more complex than a single neat reaction. Other researchers have pointed at the laurel itself, whose smoke carries its own mild intoxicants, or at henbane, or at the simplest explanation of all. A woman trained from girlhood in sacred theater, hypnotized by rhythm, incense, exhaustion, and belief, delivering a performance so complete she believed it herself. And against all of them stands the testimony that no laboratory can gas test away. Plutarch, the great philosopher of Chaeronea, served as a priest at Delphi for decades around 95 CE, the closest thing to an inside witness history has ever produced. In his essay on the obsolescence of oracles, he recorded the day a delegation demanded a consultation on an unpropitious day against every rule. The priestess was dragged to the tripod against her will. She spoke a few broken words. Then she gave a shriek so terrible the priests and envoys ran for the doors, and she collapsed where she sat. She died a few days later. Whatever was in that room, that scream entered the written record, and no amount of skepticism has ever silenced it. And then there is Alexander the Great, who, impatient with procedure, physically seized the Pythia and dragged her toward the tripod. She cried out, "You are invincible, my son." Alexander declared the prophecy delivered and marched off to conquer the known world with it. And now the last thing, the most human thing, the part every retelling buries. Was the oracle real? The honest answer is that after 2,000 years of argument, after gas theory and fraud theory and theater theory, the only honest answer is something was real. It worked for over 1,000 years. It was consulted by empires, by tyrants, by slaves. It steered the colonization of the Mediterranean. It steadied Athens through the greatest crisis in Greek history, and it outlasted every king who ever knelt before it. The end, when it came, was quiet. In the late 4th century CE, the Emperor Julian, the last pagan ruler of Rome, sent to Delphi to ask whether he should restore what remained of the sanctuary. And the oracle, speaking for the last time in the historical record, answered in verse, "Tell the king the fair-wrought hall has fallen to the ground. No longer has Phoebus a hut, nor a prophetic laurel, nor a speaking spring. The water of speech itself is quenched." In 393 CE, the Emperor Theodosius of Ors ordered the sanctuary closed, and the voice that had run the ancient world went silent. The gas, if it ever seeped, kept seeping. The laurel kept growing, but the people stopped coming, and the oracle was just a cave again. Look at your pocket right now. You are holding an oracle. You type a question, and a voice that is not yours answers in seconds, with total confidence, and you mostly trust it. Horoscopes, algorithms, chatbots, pundits, the machine that tells you what to watch, what to buy, what to believe. We have simply moved the omphalos. The Greeks built the most famous oracle in history, on top of a geological accident, operated it like a dynasty, and the only thing that genuinely mattered inside that room was a human being's need to hear the future spoken aloud by someone else. The eagles still meet, they just bring notifications now. The old woman on the tripod is a server farm in a desert you will never visit. And somewhere up on Parnassus, a sweet chemical breath still rises from the faults, making the laurel leaves tremble, waiting for someone who still knows how to listen. Hold that thought, because next week we climb the other mountain of the gods, Dodona, the oldest oracle in Greece, where Zeus spoke not through a woman but through the wind in a sacred oak, and the priests read the future in the rustling of leaves and the calls of doves. Most people have never heard a word of it. Subscribe and you will know what the whispering trees said. Drop a comment. If you could ask the Pythia one question today, what would it be? The best answers end up in the next script. Hit subscribe. We are just getting started.